young, we lived in a 2-room house
Yeah.
that had no water. We didn't have electricity. We had these coal oil lamps with the chimney on them.
Uh-huh.
And I remember they painted the house, but they did what they called calcimine, that you could get in different colors. They didn't have paint like we have today.
Wow.
So where were you living then?
Pardon?
Where were you located at? Where
This was in Malad,
Oh, okay.
where the airport is now.
Okay.
Grandpa Harrison
Yeah.
walked to Utah from Missouri when he was 14. And
From Missouri, he walked all the way to
walked
Utah?
all the way from Missouri when he was 14. His dad and the family joined the church in London, England.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks or 2 months after they joined the church, his dad was made branch president. So you can tell that they was all new members.
Yeah.
And his oldest sister and her husband emigrated to Utah, and Grandpa came with him. He was 14.
Wow.
And they got a wagon in Missouri, and his sister and her husband drove the wagon to Utah, and Grandpa walked every step of the way to Utah.
That's a long block.
And he did various jobs. One, shortly after he came to Utah in the fall, he decided to go to Logan. He thought he could maybe find a job up there.
So, are you talking about Grandpa Harrison?
Grandpa Harrison.
Okay.
And he walked up to Brigham City and then over to Wellsville. And it was getting dark and there were several inches of snow on the ground. So he was looking for a place to spend the night, and there was a pile of hay there, and he was kind of digging into the pile of hay. He could crawl into that to spend the night. And the farmer saw him and came out and talked to him and invited him to the house. And he stayed there all winter.
Wow.
And did farm chores for board and room.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few years later he worked for freighters, and he eventually got his own freighting outfit, and he freighted from Corinne, Utah. This was when the railroad came, because that was the northern point of the railroad. He freighted from Corinne, Utah to Butte, Montana. He'd bring a team of oxen and a wagon and load it up and then take it clear to Butte, Montana. It was a 3-month round trip because they'd have to camp every night out in the open and so on. And he homesteaded his farm up there.
Wow.
And that's where I grew up, was on his old homestead.
Oh,
In a 2-room house with no electricity, no running water.
yeah.
And
So this is about in the 40s, somewhere around there?
this was in the, I was born in 28, so it'd be in the early 30s.
Early 30s, okay.
And we eventually moved over to an old log house that Grandpa had built. That was basically another 2-room house, but it had 2 rooms upstairs. And we had electricity with one
Bulb.
bulb in the middle of the room hanging on a cord.
So, and you turn on the switch? Is
You
that-
had to turn the switch on by the light.
Okay.
And if you got a lightning storm, the light globes would smoke because they didn't have all the suppressors and that they have nowadays on the lights.
Yeah.
And the fuse was one of these little round plugs you screwed into.
Oh, yeah.
That was the fuses for the house.
Wow.
And the poles came up the lane, and we'd get lightning storms, and it'd hit the poles down the lane, and they'd come to the house, and the lights would smoke and everything. But we had we worked with horses.
Yeah.
That was how we did our plowing and everything.
Right.
And we had one old white mare, riding horse, we called Minnie.
Yeah.
And she was so tame you could crawl between her legs, or kids would ride her everywhere. Her only fault was if she got startled, she jumped sideways. She didn't buck or anything, she just jumped sideways, so she'd jump right out from under you. And she really wouldn't do that with kids, but an adult got on her and somebody scared her, she'd jump sideways and dump them on the ground every time. Anyway, I wanted a saddle horse so bad, and when I was 12 years old, one of the ranchers out west of Malad, Elison's, had 700
Wild Mustangs.
wild mares,
Oh, man.
wild mares, and they brought in thoroughbred studs to raise colts, because there was a big demand for saddle horses because of the cavalry. And my uncle used to buy horses for the cavalry all the time. Anyway, this rancher traded in like 200 horses for a tractor. And when I was 12 years old, Dad and my Uncle Arthur went out there. They was gonna try to buy me a horse. And they, out of 200 horses, they picked this one little gray colt. They paid $10 for him. And when we got him, he was so wild, you couldn't even touch him.
Oh.
When he was tied to the fence. He was just scared to death, because the only time he'd ever been caught was when he was castrated and branded.
Yeah.
And when he was 2 years old and a little older, we started breaking him to ride. And he was really quite wild, bucked a lot. But anyway, I got him partially broke, and DeLoss kept crying he wanted to ride him. Don't get to ride him. So he got on him, and he ran away with him, and went down around and run up to a fence and stopped and stretched the wires, and DeLoss went head over heels off of him. And so after that, if he got a chance, he'd run away with you.
Oh.
Because he figured out that that's one way you
One way to get rid of it.
Get rid of you.
But anyway, he became a great horse.
Yeah, desert.
Yeah.
How long did you have that horse then?
For 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah.
You used to race him, didn't you?
Yeah, we used to race him, and I remember one time when Jimmy was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, he was going to ride him in the race. And they had him in the paddock for people to look at before the race, and old Desert was standing there with his head down like he was half asleep, and Jimmy was laying on his back, and these two guys came up and said, "Look at that old gray horse. I doubt he can even make it to the starting line." Well, they had the race, and of course old Everett run the race. And he was just a super horse.
Tell me about when it was icy.
When what?
It was icy, and he slipped.
Oh, yeah, well, I was riding him one time. This was after he learned to run away. And it was kind of snow, and the water had run down there in a big sheet of ice. and he ran away with me. But we got on the ice, and so he slid, and his feet went out from under him, and we slid on the ice about half a block. And I was hanging onto the saddle, and when he came to a stop, he started getting up, and I stayed on the saddle, and so he didn't get rid. That's the last time he ever ran away with anybody.
And then your mother would always know when
And
you were.
when I was a little kid, 2 years old, I guess I'd follow my dad on Old Minnie
Mm-hmm.
and go out with him when he was working in the fields. And if after a while Old Minnie had come to the house, if she came to the house, if the horse came to the house with me on it, she knew that I was awake, because I'd guide him to the house. If I came in and I was asleep, she'd go in the corral to eat hay. Mother'd have to come down to the corral and get me off the horse. But
You started working away early when you was
when I was
6.
6 or 7 years old, Dad would borrow Grandpa Wells's tractor,
Uh-huh.
because we were still trying to farm with horses.
Yeah.
So occasionally Dad would borrow Grandpa Wells's tractor to do the plowing or something. So I was too little to push the pedals on the tractor or anything, but I could steer it.
Yeah.
So Dad'd get it started, and I would go around and around on the field, you know, plowing,
Right.
the way to follow the furrows and stuff.
Yeah.
And the only way I could stop the tractor was turn the key off. But so Dad'd get me started, then he'd go do something else, and I'd do the plowing. And we would borrow Grandpa Wells's tractor occasionally for several years.
So tell me about when you got scalded. Do you remember that?
I don't remember. I've got a scar on my leg, and Mother said that I tipped the tea kettle over on me and
Oh.
burnt
tea
my
kettle.
leg. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember it.
Yeah.
But I remember when we moved over to the other house, the old log house. It didn't have any plumbing or water or anything. We had a well outside 20 feet from the house that you could pump water. Dad plumbed the house and put in a pressure tank so we had water in the house. And he put in a bathroom, and I remember digging the trenches, helping dig the trenches to put in a septic system so we could have a toilet in the house and so on.
Yeah.
And I think I was like 12 or 14 at the time when we first got plumbing in the house.
So there were some stories about Grandma and you. I can't remember about Smithfield or so. Was it Smithfield?
What?
I can't. Did you go with your grandma somewhere? Your grandma and grandpa somewhere?
Well, when I think I was like 14,
Yeah.
Dad had some problems with albumin or something, and his hands got rashes on them and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And the doctor recommended that he go to California for a different climate for a while. So one winter, Dad and Mother and all the kids except me and DeLoss went to California. And we went down and stayed with Grandpa Wells. And of course we took all our milk cows down there, and me and Floyd and Grandpa milked the milk cows and so on for the winter. And we rode the bus from Woodruff back to Malad to school every day.
Oh,
And that was just for one winter.
yeah. So now, you were going to college down at the University of Utah? Were you going to the University of Utah when Grandpa died?
Yes, but when I graduated from high school, I went to Logan
Oh,
for 1 quarter.
oh, okay.
And my cousin Leon, had just got out of the Navy. And he, of course, got veterans benefits to go to school. So we went to school for 1 quarter over there. And it was in 1946. And he had saved his money while he was in the service, and he had put his name in for a new car. And we came home for Christmas, and his name came up, and he got a new 1946 Ford.
Oh,
Wow.
I think he paid $1,700 for it.
Wow.
And when he was in the Navy, he had known a guy in California quite well. So he decided he wanted to go to California, and this is at Christmas time after the quarter had ended. So right after Christmas, I went to California with him. And we got a job with a man named Walter Hawley. And he built things out of lumber, and we were building racks for
all right, for the wine.
wineries
Yeah, I remember telling
to
me.
roll the barrels in on.
Yeah.
And I did that for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. And then Dad wanted me to go on a mission, so I came home, and in April I left to go on a mission.
And where was your mission? Georgia?
North Carolina
Oh,
and
North
Virginia.
Carolina. Yeah, that's right.
So World War II was about when you were 12, 13, 14? right around
Yes, it started when I was like 12 years old.
there? Yeah.
So I was too young the whole time to go in the service.
Did you think you might end up going into the military if it continued, or?
Well, I never really thought much about it because I was too young.
Yeah, okay.
After I came back from my mission, why, they were still drafting people.
Oh, okay.
And I was classified 1A,
Oh.
and I came to Utah, to Fort Douglas, and had my physical and everything, and was classified 1A, but they never did draft me.
Oh, yeah.
Now, DeLoss was 2 years younger than
Yeah.
me, but he was drafted.
Oh, okay.
Oh, he was drafted? I didn't
He
know
was
that.
drafted, and he went to Fort Ord, and they interviewed him and needed somebody to interview the draftees.
Right.
So he got a job interviewing the new draftees and spent all the time he's in the service in Fort Ord.
Oh, really? Oh, huh. That's not too bad.
Yeah.
No, he had good duty, and I remember when he was in basic training, he came home and bragging about how good he could shoot because he got a sharp shot
Right.
shooter's medal, and
Right.
so we went up on the
You guys want a brownie?
2 mile road
Donna
and
made them.
put a can off about
They're really good.
100 yards, and he shot several times and came close, but he never did hit it.
Yeah.
So I took the gun and I hit it first flat.
So much for the marksmanship.
Oh, those are delicious.
Donna makes them. Aren't they,
Next door? Wow.
Yeah.
aren't they delicious?
Yeah.
Yeah, she really makes good brownies.
Those are delicious. You love
Take a
those.
whole one, Doug. They are
From the
delicious. She brings them over all the time
Ah,
because I give her nuts to go in.
those are delicious.
Aren't they good?
Just give me a little one.
Ah, they're so moist.
A little one.
You break it in two and save it.
Here,
Don't feed it to the dog, Larry.
Ah, they're delicious.
Aren't they
Yeah,
good?
very good.
I'm gonna have a whole one.
I want another little piece.
I know what they good.
They're really, really good.
I'll have to get a treat for you to take with you
Ah,
to the
those
meeting.
are really good.
Aren't they good?
Yeah, they're almost kind of like fudge or something.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
They're like super good. Is it from scratch? Wow.
You can't have chocolate, baby.
So that's good you weren't in the service, Dad.
Dad grew up
Well, no.
when there was no electricity
No.
or no cars or tractors of anything, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And yet, he adapted to understand the machinery and have combines and everything. And we did a lot of custom cutting of grain because he bought a big combine and of course I was just a
He
kid,
loves chocolate.
like
Pay that for you.
12 years old or something. But I bagged on the combine all the time. And I remember one time we went out to a guy's place named Will Palmer, and he was supposed to furnish one man for the combine because it took 3 men to run it. So I didn't want a bag. So they told me I could drive the tractor that pulled the combine. So Will Palmer and his hired man got up there to bag the barley,
I couldn't do it.
and they had barley scattered everywhere. If they got it, the bag full, and tried to tie it when they put it down the chute, it'd come undone. So we only went about a half a block, and they said this won't work. So me, as a little kid, I had to get up there and do the bagging, which I had no problem with.
Figures.
So you were down here in Salt Lake around when you were around 20, sounds like 18, 20, and then you went back up to
Well,
Idaho.
after my mission, I leased a farm in Malad
Oh, yeah.
and helped Dad with his farming. And in the winter I would come to Salt Lake and get a job. I did carpenter work and such, and
Yeah.
worked for a guy named George Biesinger. We were building churches and homes and stuff. And he got a job for the church going to New Zealand to build a school over there for the church. And I almost went with him. They offered me a job to go to New Zealand.
Oh, well.
But the problem was, is that left Dad with nobody to help him in the summers.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't go.
Yeah.
How far is Malad from Raymond?
Oh, it's so Malad's up. Malad's like up.
It's about
past-
150 miles.
Oh, okay.
And it's up
From
past
Raymond,
Ogden.
you say?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you grew up more in Raymond.
Yeah, I grew up more. in
Yeah,
Raymond.
it's about 150
Oh,
miles.
okay. For some reason, I was thinking
They're
there.
both in Idaho,
Yeah.
but
Raymond was about a half a mile from the Wyoming border.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So Malad's like over here, and Raymond's more like over here.
Yeah,
Okay.
Raymond is east of Malad.
Yeah.
I was having this vision they were very close.
And
Raymond-
approximately the same distance from the southern border
Oh, okay. Yeah.
with Utah.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're more mid.
And then Dingle was
Dingle-
west of Raymond.
That's after Levin and Mother took over the ranch.
Right. Then we moved.
We moved to Dingle, and I worked for an outfit called Central Farmers.
Oh yeah.
And they made a bunch of farmers in Iowa and Nebraska got together to have this fertilizer plant so they could have fertilizer for their farms. And it was called Central Farmers.
Oh, okay.
And I got a job at Central Farmers as a laborer. And shortly after I got the job, I'd worked there, I don't know, a few months. They needed some electricians.
Okay.
So, you know, with the union, they bid everything.
Right.
So there was about 20 or 25 people that bid for the job. And you wrote your experience and schooling and everything. And anyway, I got one of the 4 jobs. I stretched my experience in the sense, you know. Anyway, I got one of the 4 jobs, and I worked there for a year, and I got the 1 week's vacation. The first time I'd ever had vacation in my life. I was 34 or something. And I came back from vacation, and they had decided to close the plant.
Oh no.
So I knew one of the electrical engineers. So I talked to him and told him I needed a job. And I was offered a job in Pocatello for the outfit that makes the rockets. What do they call it? Out west of Brigham City.
Thiokol?
Thiokol.
Oh yeah. I was thinking.
I was offered a job in Pocatello with Thiokol, and I really wanted to come to Salt Lake because I thought I'd go back to school. So I talked to the engineer, and he called General Electric, and I quit working on, I think the last day was like Thursday or something. I came to Salt Lake on Friday and was interviewed at General Electric. Took my physical on Monday and went to work for General Electric. And
then it didn't. The next week or so, you came and packed us up, or when?
yeah, and the next
Weekend.
week after that, I borrowed Levin's truck and loaded Charla or Eula and the kids up, and we moved to Salt Lake.
Yeah.
And I worked for General Electric for, I don't know, 3 months or so. And they got a job to rebuild the line locomotives for Kennecott, 6 of them. And that entailed taking them clear down to the frame, taking all the electrical equipment out of it, all the wiring, everything. And then, of course, rewiring and rebuilding
Yeah.
all the equipment. And
Yeah.
so we got that job, and I was made lead man over the project. And we rebuilt 6 locomotives for Kennecott. And they called me in after we had completed them and told me that, thank you, because of you, we made profit on those locomotives.
That's cool. Yeah.
And then I was in charge of rebuilding a locomotive for, when we moved down here, I rented a house, and we lived there for a couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
One of the guys that I worked with built a new house out in Granger, a little further out. And I went and helped him wire it and got it all ready and everything. And he moved in it. Shortly after he moved in, he got a job for United States Steel at the coal mine in Colorado. And he had this new house, and he didn't want to sell it. He says, why don't you move in and get the lawn planted and everything, and he rented it to me. I don't know how much we paid, a couple $100 a month or whatever it was. So we lived there for about a year, and he came back to Utah and said, I don't want to keep that house, why don't you buy it? I said, Joel, I don't have any money. He says, have you got $500? And I said, yeah, I can probably rake up $500. He said, give me $500 and take over the payments and it's yours.
Oh, okay.
So that's how we got the house in Granger.
Oh, yeah.
That was a good thing.
And we lived there for several years. And then GE moved from down in Salt Lake out here to North Salt Lake. And it was a hassle driving, so then we started looking for a house out here.
Yeah.
And we looked at houses in Farmington all over, but this was the house your mother decided she wanted. So we bought this house, and that's how we came to move out here.
Yeah. Okay. So how long you been in this house then?
We moved here in '72, so I've been here, what, 43 years.
Wow. Okay.
Wow, you've lived here 42 years? Yeah. It's a long time.
And have you done anything? Have you changed anything over the years about the
Yeah,
house?
they changed the kitchen.
You remodeled the kitchen.
Remodeled the kitchen, I remodeled both bathrooms, I built the
Rock shop.
rock shop downstairs. I put new siding on it and new insulation under the siding, a new roof with insulation under the roof,
New window.
new windows, new doors.
Blinds. Is this floor new too?
No, this is
Oh,
the
is this the
original
original
floor.
floor?
But it had a carpet on it when we moved
Oh,
it.
yeah, I thought.
And we, when Charlotte moved in here, we took the carpet up and found the floor.
Oh, and you're like, wow, who
So
would carpet over it?
We just
Yeah.
took all the nails out of the carpet or out of the floor and
Yeah,
and did some sanding on it, and then we just put varnish
Wow.
on it.
yeah, it looks
It's
good.
amazing so that floor is like 40 some plus years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
The house was built, I think, around 1960,
Okay.
and we moved here in
So it's
72.
about, so this house is for 55, about 55 years old in this house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, so it's
We put carpet
about
on
as
it.
old as you, dear.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess 1960. That's when I was born. So.
but it's been a comfortable home, and it pretty economical for heat and cooling.
It's got a gorgeous backyard. The backyard's just really
And the
pretty.
backyard, we haven't done much to it. It was kind of roughed in the way it is, and I planted the apple trees and the plum tree. And
So tell me some stories about when you and your brothers and sisters were young.
well, I remember one thing.
Oh dear.
Grandma Wells used to come and visit us pretty regular.
Uh-huh.
And when Grandma come, that meant we cleaned up the yard and the house and everything.
Yeah.
So, one summer when we were real small, the irrigation water had run down in kind of a puddle there, And me and DeLoss and I believe Emma had went out and rolled in the mud and played in the water and and came to the house and Grandma was there. And about a block and a half away was an old flow well. And the water was ice cold. So she took us down there with the broom and to the flow well and scrubbed us off.
Oh, I bet that was crazy.
But we used to go down to Grandpa and Grandma Wells quite a bit.
Yeah. So what did you guys do when you were little?
Well, I had to help Dad. So from the time I was a little shaver, I was gone all day with Dad, you know, either driving horses or tractor or something. And DeLoss was 2 years younger. Mother needed help, so he got to stay in the house and help Mother all the time.
I see.
And
Yeah.
when Mother and Dad would go away for the day or the evening or something, why I was in charge.
Oh.
And we had a bunch of milk cows to milk and chores to do. And it was my job to make sure the cows got milked and everything. And
Yeah.
so me and DeLoss had lots of battles because he didn't want to help.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we survived it all.
Yeah. Yeah. So was all the kids, all your brothers and sisters born in Malat?
Yes.
So were they born at home or in a hospital?
I think they were born in the hospital.
Were you born in a hospital?
I think I was born at Grandma Harrison's.
Oh.
Grandma Harrison was a midwife.
I didn't know that. She was a midwife?
She was a midwife.
Cool.
And that's actually how Mother and Dad got to know each other.
Well, tell me this story. I don't know this story either.
Well, they were both going to high school in Malat, but Grandma Wells had a baby, the youngest baby, Nova, and Grandpa Harrison was the midwife. And in those days, the midwife went and stayed at the home of the baby for a week or two.
Yeah.
And took care of the baby and,
Huh?
you know,
Yeah.
relieved the mother of all the chores.
Right.
So that's, Grandma Harrison went down to Grandpa Wells's and took care of Grandma Wells and the baby. And before that, Mother and Dad just, you know, barely knew who each other
Oh,
was.
I see.
And because of that, they became friends, I guess, and eventually got married.
Yeah. Uh-huh. That's an interesting story. I've never heard that before.
That's really the way they had babies years ago.
Yeah.
Is with a midwife who would come and stay for a week or 10 days or
Right.
whatever it was.
Right.
In fact, Charlotte's grandmother was a midwife too.
Huh? Huh.
She delivered 50 children.
Wow. Well, I did read that midwives actually had better birth rates. So in the 1700s, they introduced hospitals, and they started having a lot of babies and mothers die.
Had a lot of infections.
Yeah, because of infections, but they didn't realize it at the time, and the midwives were actually more successful and had less deaths.
Yeah.
Which, this was eventually figured out it was that purple fever in the 1800s, and that, germs and stuff was
Yeah.
causing it.
So how did you guys meet girls out in Malad there? And do you...
Well, there was a lot of them up there.
Yeah.
I never was serious with any girl in Malad.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
You didn't have those.
I guess I was just an ugly farmer's kid.
Because you were just busy working on the farm, doing your chores, and
You're tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, they didn't have those like they always show on the movies. They have some kind of dance and some kind of
Yeah.
Well, Malad was at one time was quite a lot of people there because all the farms were like 160 acres from the
Oh.
Homestead Act.
Oh.
And as the farms became more mechanized, then it took 2 or 3 or half a dozen or a dozen of these small farms to make one farm.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
And so when I was little, Saturday night was a big night in Malad because all the farmers from all over the valley came to town to do their shopping on Saturday and
Oh, yeah.
maybe go see a show or something or whatever they did. And
Huh. Yeah.
so Saturday night was a big night. And they had 2 theaters in Little Malad.
Uh-huh.
And
So they'd all kind of come in Saturday, stop working, and drive
Yeah.
in from their various farms and places.
but that was one thing that we never did. We very seldom went to town on Saturday. And
And were most of the people Mormon too?
yeah, Mormons and bootleggers.
Oh,
Bootleggers.
Mormons and bootleggers. Okay.
Well, I know the rich men in town were at one time bootleggers. But those were different kind of times.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you have a lot of? Because I think one time we noticed that some of the language patterns seemed to be from certain parts of England. Did you have a lot of people who were from England or from the east? What kind of mix of people was out there?
Well, most of the people in Malad were English or Welsh.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Welshmen, Jones, Evans, Thomas, Williams, and so there'd be 2 or 3 Tom Joneses, for example.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So one was Tom Jones, one was Tom Q, Billy Snipe, Benny Alkali, Dave Fats, Creamery Bill, Bill Taters, Davy Cottontail, Whispering Dave, Wisdom. You know, I mean, everybody had a nickname.
What was yours? Did you?
Well, I don't know what my name was. These were older people than
Oh,
me.
yeah. Okay.
And Tom Q, Tom Jones, was in the barber shop, and he just had a little ring of hair around, you know, the side. He's pretty bald. And old Whispering Dave came in and put his hand up there, and he says, "By hell, Dave, feels just like my wife's ass." Tom put his hand up there and says, "By hell, it does, don't it?"
That's a good one.
Jeez.
But it was,
Yeah.
you know, it was surprising. Little Art, Tall Bill,
Yeah.
just a lot of people were nicknamed
Yeah.
because there were so many Dave Williamses or Tom Joneses or
Right.
Ben Evans. And
Yeah.
So the farms were cows, I guess, corn. What kind of stuff was there growing up there and
they
raising?
grew potatoes and alfalfa and, of course, the grains.
Yeah.
they didn't grow any corn in Malad. In fact, when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, Dad went to Logan and went to school one winter and worked with the Logan dairy
Okay.
part of the University of Utah there, Utah State. And so we grew the first patch of corn that I know of in Malad for feed to cattle.
Oh, okay.
Dad was quite forward looking, and
Oh yeah.
we always had milk cows. Of course we had bulls along with the milk cows until artificial insemination came into vogue. And I know I got chased by bulls more than once. I remember old Minnie, if there was a bull with the cows, she was scared to death of the bulls. She would just literally tremble when you'd get close to a bull. Because one time we were putting up hay and had her, old Minnie, tied to the fence. And the bull came over and just bellowing and carrying on, you know how they do. And he went up to Minnie and put his head under her, behind her front legs, and threw her over the fence.
Oh,
This
no.
is a true story.
Oh my gosh.
And she was just scared to death of bulls.
Oh, huh. Wow.
And I remember we always were scared of bulls. I remember one time, I don't know where the folks were, and I was gone someplace too, but Delos and Emma were home, and the bull came over to the barn, and they happened to be down there, and the bull kind of took after them, and they, of course, run to the house and went in and shut the door. And the bull came up to the door and look in the windows at them.
Oh my gosh.
Scared the hell out of them.
That would be scary.
When I was little, I got a dog, kind of a reddish brown, slick-haired little dog, and I called him Wolf, and he was really my buddy. If we'd play baseball or anything, he'd get the ball and he wouldn't give it to anybody but me. It'd all make everybody so mad. But one evening, I went over to the corral where the cows were, the milk cows were, to get them to milk them for the evening. And we had a great big Holstein bull in a corral. We had electric fence around it. And I walked around the corner of the stackyard and almost walked into this big bull. And he took after me, and I ran as hard as I could. And about from here across the street to the fence, and I dove under the fence. And I turned around, and my dog, who had never chased a cow in his life, I'm not kidding you, this Wolf, dog I called Wolf, you couldn't even get him to bark at a cow. But I turned around and he had the bull right by the nose. And of course the bull shook his head and shook Wolf off, and Wolf right back in his face and chased the bull away. But if it hadn't been for that dog, I'd have been probably hurt really bad or killed.
Yeah. Huh. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, when we were kids, we were scared of the bulls. I'm not kidding you.
Are bulls always that mean?
Hereford bulls are not mean at all, but Holstein, Guernsey, and Jersey bulls are mean as hell.
Oh, huh. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. Huh.
So you gotta herd them all together with horse. How do you move them around there?
Well, they kept the bull in special pens, the big
Okay.
bulls. And if he ever got out, why it'd, 2 or 3 guys on horseback would get
No.
after him with whips
Oh, okay.
and chase him, because they'll take after a horse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the horses were scared to death of the bulls too. But they'd take after him with whips to get him back in the corral.
Oh, wow.
No wonder they
They
decided
don't go out
to
and
do-
rope them and.
No, they just take a whip and drive him.
Okay.
And most of the bulls, when they were little, they'd put a ring in their nose.
Yeah,
If you could, and they had special tools, a long handle,
Yeah.
that you could get a hold of the ring
Yeah. Yeah.
to control the bull.
Yeah.
But unless you had a hold of his ring, you had no control over him. I know one time, Dad, we had a bull and he was young, but he was getting older. And I told Dad, I said, that bull's getting mean. And Dad laughed at me, no, he's not mean. Well, he got Dad in the mangers one time. Let him out. So we hauled the bull to the sale the next week.
I didn't know that's why they put rings in bulls' noses, was
So
to
they
control.
control them.
I had no idea. I had seen bulls with the ring, but I didn't realize that was why.
That was so they could control
Yeah,
them.
that makes sense now that you're saying that. I had no idea though.
Come here, Will.
That's interesting.
Come here.
I heard one time horses try to play tricks on you sometimes. That they.
You
I
pardon?
heard one time horses play tricks on you or don't like certain people at sometimes, and you might want to
Oh,
kick
yeah.
them or do something like that.
Buck them off or something.
Or kick them when they walk behind them. Certain
Yeah.
people that
I know after Mother and Levin took over the ranch, Jimmy had a colt that he was breaking. And he didn't tell me this. I was watering a neighbor's field, so every day I'd ride a horse out to water the fields. And Jimmy said to me, hey, why don't you take that colt and ride him out to change the water? He needs exercise. So I, okay. So he brought him over and I tied him to the fence and put the saddle on him and crawled on him and went out to change the water. Everything seemed to be okay. The next day I crawled on him and rode him out to change the water, and I changed the water and got back on him, and I was coming back through the meadow. Boy, he started backing and throwed me off in about 6 inches of water. And
Jeez.
so he ran clear down to the corner of the field. So I walked down there, and on the way I found a stick about this long, and
Oh,
I caught him and crawled on him, and he started bucking, and
yeah.
I beat the tar out of him, and every time he'd slow down I'd hit him again, and then I found out the reason Jimmy wanted me to ride him is he'd been throwing Jimmy off all the time.
Oh. Wasn't there one time when you got shot or something and Desert brought you home, or?
No. Dad loved to trade horses. He grew up when that's all they had was horses. And he was always bringing home horses. And he brought home a beautiful little Pinot mare. We called her Painted Lady. And she was supposed to be green broke, but every time I got on her, she bucked. May not be when I first got on, but before I got off, she would buck. And I know one time I was chasing cattle along the road, and some tourists came along and honked the horn, and she started bucking.
Yeah.
Every time she'd slow down, they'd toot the horn again.
Irritating.
He brought another beautiful little sorrel horse home,
Yeah,
and he bought him at the ring in Ogden.
yeah.
And I said, well, what did they say about him? He said, nobody said anything about him. The auctioneer says, well, looks like he's working, he's got shoes on. Because he had shoes on. We went to put the saddle on him and couldn't get the saddle on him. We had to throw him down to get the saddle on him. And we got the saddle on him, and I got on him, and he bucked some, but not too bad. And we chased cattle all day. He didn't know anything about guiding or reining or anything.
Yeah,
But the next day when we went to put the saddle on him, we had to throw him down and get the saddle on him. What Dad figured was he's a horse that had been a bucking horse
oh,
and had kind of quit bucking, so that's how they'd sold him. So he
Oh,
just
I
took him
see.
back to the auction and sold him again.
yeah. Well, so, how did you break a horse? I think you told me this story before.
Well, the first thing you did with the horse was break him to lead.
Right.
And then there was a couple of ways to break him to ride. You put a saddle on him and got on him and rode him till he quit bucking, if you could ride him. The other way was put a saddle on him and get on him, and then get another horse or two, like
Yeah.
one on each side of him,
Right.
and ride him so that he couldn't buck. And you just kept riding them till they got accustomed to you, and then you teach them to rein and guide and do all the things that they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I remember you told me about the two horses on either side of the horse. I thought
Yeah.
that was pretty ingenious. You know.
And then you really couldn't put a bridle on a new horse because they would fight it so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd make special halters, like you'd have leather and you'd roll bumps on it. So it had a big bump like on either side of his nose, of
Right.
like a ball of leather on the halter. That so you could control him better without the bridle.
Yeah, interesting. So, you raised sheep when we lived in Raymond.
Pardon?
You raised sheep when we lived in Raymond?
Yes,
How many did you have?
I had 50 milk cows and about 50 head of Herefords, range cattle that had a permit on the mountain in the summer. And then I had 350 head of ewes.
So if you have that many cows, or whatever, how often are some of them are sick then, or died, or some? Is that always
No,
happening, or?
We never had any problem. Once in a while you'd get one sick and there was a vet in the county that would come and doctor them. And
So you're usually in pretty good health, and then you end up, I guess,
Yeah.
selling them or something.
So you used to go around, so I think you told me something about a milk truck or somebody had a milk route or something.
well, when I lived in Malad, Floyd, Mother's brother, had the milk route and took all the dairies from Malad over to Cache Valley to Cache Valley Dairy. And one year, Floyd hired me to run the milk truck. I got I think it was $175 a month. And I'd go to all the dairies and I would, I had so many cans that you had to double deck the cans inside the truck bed. And then I would drive the truck to Cache Valley, and then I had to take every can out of the truck and put it on a conveyor belt where it went in to have the milk dumped. And then the cans would come out and I'd load all the empty cans And then the next morning when I picked up the milk at the dairies, I'd leave their old cans and pick up the new ones with milk in them.
Right. Yeah,
And each can of milk weighed around 100 pounds. And you had to lift it about 3.5, 4 feet to the bed of the truck.
that's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of hard work. Lifting them cans. I've tried lifting my suitcase up into the bin, the overhead bin.
Yeah.
Well, when I was young, working on the farm in the hayfields, I figured I could outwork any man around.
Yeah.
And I
He's so
could.
crippled.
Yeah, and you could, yeah, I'm sure you could.
And I very seldom had an opportunity to work for neighbors, but anytime I had an opportunity, there was neighbors willing to hire me because
Yeah, I'm sure you were a good worker.
and one time I went to work for a guy named George Jones, and we were out in the hayfield, and I had rode Old Desert down there. And we finished up in the morning, and so he pulled the wagon up there with the team and was loading the hay that had slid off the stack onto the wagon to take in for the horses to feed. And I had just turned Old Desert loose, and he was wandering out in the field. Excuse me. I walked out there and walked up to him and was putting the bridle on him, and the team that he had on the wagon ran away. And so I never even finished putting the bridle on him. I just jumped on him and took after him. And I caught the wagon and got on the wagon and got the team stopped just as they got to the fence. They stretched the wire about this far, but I got them stopped before they got hurt or before the wagon got broke up. And the old George Jones, as soon as I got back, he wanted to buy Old Desert.
Yeah, I'm sure.
He said he'd never seen anything move so fast in his whole life.
Yeah. Well, I remember those Shetlands that you had, those Shetland ponies when we lived in Dingle.
Yeah, I bought Shetland ponies for you girls.
Yeah, one of them bit
Oh,
me or somebody on the back.
Oh.
I can't remember who it was. Yeah, they were bite.
Well, a lot of horses, especially when you put a saddle on them and go to cinch it up, will turn and give you a nip.
Oh, yeah. So I can't remember if it was me or one of us got bit by the
Yeah.
horse. Yeah.
They can be pretty painful too.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. Yeah. And then they had those mink cages. Do you remember the mink cages that they had in Dingle? At the house we rented in Dingle?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember those. There weren't any minks in them, but
Yeah, we never had any mink. I never did.
yeah, I remember the cages.
Yeah, when I went to Central Farmers as a laborer, they put me in loading boxcars. And they had a conveyor that came out and went in the boxcar. And they had these, I think they were 80 or 100-pound bags of fertilizer. And we loaded 1,200 bags in one boxcar. And that was my job, loading the bags in the boxcar. There was 2 of us, and you took every other bag, and some of them you have to throw way above your head, stacking them up. but in 8 hours we would load 4 boxcars.
It's a lot of work.
So in one day you'd stack 2,400
Uh-huh.
bags of fertilizer in 8 hours.
Now you could probably eat like 1 billion calories and not gain weight.
Well, I never gained much weight in my whole life.
Yeah, that's hard work, lifting those heavy bags. Yeah, that would be hard. So what was your favorite job?
Tell them what your favorite job is.
Retired.
Charlotte knew that was coming.
So how did you get into rocks? Tell me about your whole rock.
Well, DeLoss lived in Springville down by Provo. And he got interested in it.
Oh,
And that's how I got interested in it. We would meet in Lehigh. He'd come up to Lehigh and I would go down to Lehigh and we'd go rock hunting. The first time we went, we were supposed to meet at a little drive-in in Lehigh, and I waited about a half hour and he didn't show up. Finally, one of us walked around the building, one of us on one side and one was on the other on this little drive-in. And so we started going out to the geode beds and rock hunting and stuff. And he got real interested in it. And he bought a kit for a saw, a diamond saw. But you had to build the tank and the stand and everything. So I built the stand and the tank and everything for it. And that was the first rock saw. And then after that, I couldn't afford a rock saw or anything, so I used to build rock saws.
yeah.
I rebuilt a 16 and then I built a 20-inch rock saw. And then I built 4 24-inch rock saws. And DeLoss got one and Kyle got one, Kyle Swallow, and Vic Corey got one. And then I built, I can't remember, 2 or 3 36-inch rock saws.
They just keep getting bigger.
And anyway, that's how I got into rock saws. And then I started making some jewelry and such. And I had a couple of gift shops in Port City that would buy the jewelry from me. And so I started making quite a lot of jewelry, and it got so I was working every spare minute I wasn't working at GE making jewelry. And that year we went to Mexico. I sold enough jewelry, that's how we went took the family to Mexico that winter.
Yeah.
And I couldn't afford rock hammers, so I made my own rock hammers.
Yeah.
And of course, my friends wanted rock hammers. So for several years, I'd just make a few for me and my friends.
Right.
And they always kept telling me, you ought to make these and sell them. So then I started making rock hammers, and I used to sell around 500 of those a year. And
Yeah. Well, it's like those little picks. There's no better pick than those ones you made.
the one show we did in Arizona, S-Wing is a national brand, and they came and the guy was selling them and I was selling my rock picks, and he came over and says, hey, Everybody I see is going by with one of your hammers. How many have you sold? And I looked and we'd sold 126, I believe it was. And he says, do you know how many I've sold? I said, no. He says, 2. So anyway, I made rock hammers for years, and
Yeah.
they went to Canada and Europe and Australia that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
And that guy up in Logan, remember he was it coasters or what was it?
Well, yeah, he's bought
yeah.
coasters, but one guy came to me and asked me about my hammers. He says, I went out in Oregon to the sunstone and was digging sunstones. He says, I had an Estwing, a brand new Estwing, and these sunstones are in cavities in lava rock, so it's real abrasive to try to get them. He said, I had an Estwing, and one day my Estwing was wore so bad I could hardly use it. He says, one of my friends gave me one of your hammers. He says, I used it for 3 days and you could still see the sand marks on the point.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
What was making those hammers so good?
The metal. It was called astroloy, and it's a expensive metal, but I would buy it and then beat it out in a forest.
Right. Okay. Cool.
And it was self-tempering, so that it was made especially to resist wear and breakage. They put it in rectangular bars and put it on the bottom of grater blades and really areas where there was a lot of wear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was perfect for hammers.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you bought the handles, and then you made the heads and put them on.
I made the heads out of Schedule 80
Right.
steel pipe, and the handles, when I first started making them, I used wooden handles because I couldn't find anything else. And then I went to Smith and Edwards, a place up here that sold all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And they had these fiberglass handles.
Yeah.
And so I found out where they came from and I started using them.
Yeah. Those are really good. I really like those.
And they were great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, because they're light.
I
Lighter.
would buy
So,
like 500 handles at a
Yeah.
time.
yeah.
And I had tried before to find them, but they were so expensive I couldn't afford them.
Yeah.
But when I would buy like 500 handles, I'd get them for
Yeah.
like $3 a piece or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the roller bearings, sorry.
And then I used roller bearings as the hammer part of it.
Oh.
Roller bearings are special made, very clean steel, no impurities in it. So it makes really good heads for hammers because it won't flare out. You know how you hit a hammer and it flares and then it'll chip off. These roller bearings won't do that. So that's what I used for the head on the hammers that I would get out of equipment that was
Oh yeah.
scrapped at General Electric. The bearings were scrapped. So I'd get the scrap bearings and use them for my hammers.
Wow. Interesting. So did you find that out just
Don't make
by
any.
discovery? Was it just an idea that came to you, or how did
I
you?
had made just regular hammers out of these bearings for a number of years before I ever made a rock hammer.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. I
And
wouldn't even have thought of it.
We can't find them anymore, roller bearings. Can
Yeah.
you?
Well, they have to come out of special equipment because they have to be roller bearings, which is a long bearing, and they have to be about the right diameter and everything.
Well, when you were forging stuff, did didn't Royd or somebody come over here and think they were gonna do it? And
Well, they lost too,
She lost,
but
had a heart attack.
when I was just making one or two, I'd do it at work. I'd just light a acetylene torch and use it to heat the metal, to beat them out. And then after I retired, I couldn't do that. And before that, I was only making a hammer once in a while. But when I retired,
Well, we went to Tucson
I-
here.
tried using, you know, just any place and get some coke or charcoal and
Right.
try to heat the metal. And we went to Arizona and there was a guy selling forges.
oh, okay.
And I think they were $1,200 or
For
something.
white, ridiculous.
And Charlotte wanted me to buy one and I said, no, I'll go home and make one.
He says, I got the idea, I know how to do it.
So I
Dad
came
like
home
makes everything.
and made a little forge for $25.
Yeah.
And I used the shop vac as the blower,
Oh yeah.
because if you're using
Coke.
coke, you have to have air on it or it won't burn. And then I'd sit out there and beat out
Yeah.
150 or 200 points at a whack. And, the loss came down and I was doing them and he said, let me do one. He did two and that's all he could take. He couldn't stand it and I'd sit there and do 150 or 200. And then Royd came over and says, here, I'll do that for you. He beat out two and says, I'll never work. That's the hardest work I've ever done.
He says, I
How
will
much
never
do you get
work.
for these? I
Yeah.
said, oh, about $25 a ham. He said, boy, I wouldn't work that hard for $25.
So he quit.
Yeah.
He wouldn't
Yeah. Yeah.
quit. It was funny.
Well, Chase decided to do, made a knife. And he got our Weber barbecuer. And
He got a file. He made it out of a file blade, or a steel file, and then he used the Weber somehow to kind of shape it, heat it
then
up, and shape it.
Shape it and everything. Told him, I said, you need to go see Grandpa and talk to Grandpa because he likes similar kind of things like you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was making the. He got the blade done, but I think he got stuck on making the handle. He had ideas about how to make the handle, but he didn't.
But
Didn't
his
finish it.
friend, I think he made one for his friend. His friend liked his knife so much, his friend asked him to make him one, but he only made like a couple of them. But yeah, he likes that kind of stuff. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, the first two knives I made out of a file, out of files.
Yeah.
And I gave one to Levan. And he always cut up his own beef and everything.
Right.
And he told me, he says, that's the only knife I've ever had that I could cut up a whole beef and not have to sharpen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you do the hand? So you made the knife out of a file, and then you made the handles too, or
Yes, I made the handles.
did
But
you
they
make them out of wood or
were-
like?
No, it was out of
Rock.
a composite material
Oh yeah.
Oh,
that General Electric had.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
See, I think Chase wanted to try to make a wood handle,
Yeah.
and we went and bought some blocks of wood.
Well, no. Well,
You know, like he wanted to carve it or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know what he did eventually make the handle from. It seems like the wood didn't work.
I don't
or
recall seeing a finished one. I think we were just in the middle of the design on the handle and how to attach it to the blade
Yeah.
and how we were going to cut it. He wanted to. We were going to cut the outline with the. I think maybe with a bandsaw. He was going to carve the rest of it or something like that. And then we were trying to figure out how you would attach it. I think we just never finished between. Yeah.
After I made those two knives, I had made the brass finger guard especially one that I made on the knives. I
Oh,
decided I wanted to put rock handles on them because I've
yeah.
been working with rock. And I think the first year I made knives, I made 80 of them. And I'd sell them almost immediately when I got to Arizona. In fact, some of one especially, the collectors, always came and saw me before the show because he wanted to see the knives before anybody
Yeah,
else
pick
saw.
out the one he wanted.
And he bought, I think the most he bought in one time was like 7.
Yeah.
But I had one guy from California that I think the most he bought was 18 at one time.
Wow.
Still owes your farm too.
Ah, that's terrible. He took 18 knives and then didn't pay Dad?
Hasn't paid
Well,
you.
he paid for them, but,
No, he didn't, Larry.
well, the first ones he did.
Oh, maybe, okay.
He bought a bunch, you know, for several years that he always paid for them. And then when the Depression came along, he came and, I don't know, he bought like $2,400 worth.
And then didn't pay yet.
And then he
So
paid me all but $900
$900.
eventually.
Wow. Wow.
But it's been 5 years,
Yeah.
or 6 years.
7 years,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
You sent 2 boys on a mission.
Yeah.
Probably what?
Yeah. Wow.
But I had lots of collectors that,
Yeah.
Yeah, your knives are nice.
a lot of collectors that just bought them from pictures. I'd mail them pictures of the knives and they'd
And
buy
then
them.
they
Remember that turquoise one you did that one year? That was a gorgeous knife.
Yeah. I remember one year, after we started doing the show in Arizona, this one kid, I guess he was in his early 20s,
Funny, yeah.
he came up to the table several times, and I had this one night I really liked. And I told Charla, he must have come 5 or 6 times and just oogle over this knife. I told Charla, I said, if he comes back one more time, I'm going to give him that knife. And he came back and he told me, he says, oh, I like that knife so bad, but if I buy it, I don't have any money to get home on.
Wild? No.
I said, well, you just take the knife, and when you get home, you can send me a check. So for 3 or 4 weeks till we got home, Charlotte gave me the raspberries every day. You'll never see that, you gave it away.
Knife goodbye, Larry. You can kiss
But
that knife
when we-
goodbye.
When we got home about a month later, why, there was a check and a nice letter from
Oh,
him.
that's good.
And I did that with several guys, and they always invited us to come and stay with them, and always paid me.
Welcome to come to
That's
Washington.
nice.
If you're ever up there, come and see me and
That's nice.
have a place to stay.
Yeah, that's nice. That's
was.
nice.
So
Yeah.
after that, I didn't. And then tell him about the guy that bought all the sandstone from you that come by and wanted to buy wholesale, and I said, no, Larry's not here.
Oh, yeah. We had coasters and all kinds of arches and everything, and
Fountains and
this fountains, and this guy come talk to Charlotte, ask her, do you sell wholesale? She says, I don't know, you'll have to talk to Larry. So he came over and he was dressed in a pair of shorts
my hell.
and wearing those shoes with this slips over your big toe, you know,
Yeah.
what do they call them, flip-flops or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
He says, I'd like to buy like $3,500 of your rock.
Wild, come here.
I didn't have quite that much completed because I was still working on it. I says,
Lay
okay.
down right here.
if you'll come back on Thursday, I'll have it all for you. Gave me his order. Charlotte said, did you see him? I bet he ain't got a nickel. He'll never come back.
We
And,
worked all week getting
I
the
worked-
order ready.
And got it all ready for him, and sure enough, he came and bought it. And he came from New York. He trained as a ballet dancer in New York.
Oh my God.
He had the ugliest legs and the toes that were just dirty.
Anyway,
He's scary.
after that, he bought, I think the biggest sale we made to him was what, $8,000?
8,000.
Ah,
Okay.
ah,
He did shows in California.
yeah.
He's the
And-
neatest guy, and his wife was just lovely.
Really nice, sweet people.
Mhm.
In fact, we went down there.
Is that the person that you, that
We
went and
delivered
took
down to
those
Yeah, yeah.
Posters to?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was gonna ask you if that was a person.
yeah.
Yeah.